There we go.
All right, welcome everybody to the webinar. We're going to get started in just 1 second here. Appreciate your attendance today.
Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome everyone. We're ready to go, right?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, let's go.
Get the slides up.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome again to the webinar. Tim and I'd like to talk to all of you today about some research that we performed with the Everest Group that we're very excited about, and really focuses on finding ROI and business growth from your technology investments. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Tim Britt, CEO for Synoptek, to the conversation here today. And my name is Jerry McGlynn. I lead the consulting practice for Synoptic. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, I'm excited to go through this today. It's funny, Jerry and I have worked together almost 20 years as Jerry's held a number of CIO, VP of technology roles in organizations in a variety of industries, and we've had the opportunity to work with Jerry as a client, and now we've been fortunate to have him join us the last couple of years. So it's kind of fun to do this with you, Jerry.
Yeah, same here. This is going to be a fun conversation. I think the research to me has been really interesting. I've learned a lot from looking into some of the raw data and the outcomes that we found, but also seen a lot of commonality from the organizations as well as the customers that I've worked with over the years. And I'm excited to share this information with everybody, and in hopes that you'll all be able to find some benefit from this research and be able to apply it into your everyday work. So why don't we go ahead and maybe, Tim, we just start with what is happening from a macroscopic perspective across all of the different sectors that are out there looking for technology to aid them in their work.
Thanks, Sherry. It's interesting, right? We talk about the growth of digital transformation and the investments companies and different organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, public organizations are making to transform, right? We've come up with this term digital transformation. And it's super interesting, right? One thing I think we've observed, as well as other leaders in the tech industry, is that every company is a technology company, right? It's, we have more digital interactions with our customers, digital interactions with our suppliers. We have digitally enabled processes, AI enabled automation. We make decisions with data-driven decisions, and it's all part of what has become known as this digital transformation phase of the evolution of technology. And what's really interesting is we talk about digital transformation as it's something we choose to do, right? But the fact of the matter is, this is part of what the human race is doing to be more efficient, be more innovative, leverage our resources more efficiently globally. And this is happening, and the companies that are doing it are just participating. And to be honest, the ones that aren't, it'll be questionable whether they're around 5-10 years from now. It's just the way the world's going, and it's interesting when you see the innovation that's occurring. And these are just a few of the industries that we see out there that are making material investments in this, in their digitally enabled business. And the real interesting thing, and this is what we're going to talk a little bit about in this research, is those organizations that really form their business strategy and tie their digital investments to the business results they're trying to achieve directly, specifically, in a tangible, achievable way. And we've identified a group of those customers and organizations that are achieving much higher success and much higher results in that process. So we're excited about talking about that today.
Tim, I think the other thing that's in common here, and again, the research kind of alludes to this as well, the common theme across all of these sectors is more direct interaction with the end consumer of whatever product or service that they happen to be getting to be putting out there. It's common across this slide as well, is that direct interaction. And again, it could be a direct person-to-person interaction, but it could also be a person-to-technology interaction in the case of call centers and things like that, where what we're seeing, even in our own personal lives, that there's just an ingrowing or evolving expectation that the technology is going to be doing more for me as as I go about my day-to-day life working with the companies that I happen to work with. So that is a common theme, and we see it in the research as well. So with that, maybe we use that then as a jump to say, okay, across these sectors, a lot of technologies are being thrown out there. And I think that there's definitely a hype cycle that's going on with a lot of this material that companies are struggling with navigating. I think that, the other thing that we definitely see is that as the world is growing, there's more technology coming into play, and there's an expectation that technology is all going to be integrated and tied together. And, maybe, I'd love to kind of hear your perspective is, from the customers that we support at Synoptek, how are they kind of working through all of this, and how are we helping them get through all of this?
Jerry, I think you're absolutely right. You look at this list of technologies, IoT, AI, 3D printing, augmented reality, all of these different elements. These are really components of this digital transformation we're talking about. But as we're saying, the companies that are winning aren't just implementing a technology for technology's sake. They are really tying it to their business and thinking through, because you can go spend a lot of money on all these different technologies and not really have an impact, right? So it's really taking these components, integrating it in a way that's really tied to your business. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the companies that are doing that.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, we're doing that in the consulting areas. We're helping customers build their own roadmaps and understand how they get from their current state into that future place that they want to be. And as much as they want to get there overnight, I think there is this realization that there needs to be a development of competency, but then this constant evolution that doesn't stop. It's continually morphing and evolving and adding new technology. And that's kind of where the innovation and governance components of the study, I think, is going to help people chart that course more effectively for themselves. And so maybe without further ado, maybe we kind of just jump right into the research itself, and we'll talk about what we went ahead and find. So Tim, tell me about, this was prior to me joining the organization. So you discovered Everest Group and you went out and did this survey. So tell me and the rest of the attendees here how we came to this moment.
Well, we were really thinking about this challenge organizations have of trying to think about how much to invest in their digital capabilities. And we wanted to figure out a way to measure that, both in a snapshot way, but over time, and see how companies are progressing. So the idea behind this survey, we engaged the Everest Group, which has done a fantastic job in helping us think through this. But the real idea is to identify some outcomes, business results. That could be revenue growth. It could be the increased profitability and efficiency, et cetera, and really tying that to their overall technology ecosystem and their capabilities for managing that. And so we're not just saying you guys manage technology better and you have the technologies in place. We're saying you're doing all of that and you're getting business results. So we really wanted to identify this group of organizations, which we're calling the Pinnacle group, that are really doing it well.
Yeah.
And the exciting thing about it is we know this is a long process and we want to measure it over time. So we want to come back every year and be able to, show organizations how they're progressing over time. And we're excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe to kind of walk into some of the information here to help people understand how to look at this graph and most likely, if you're anything like me, you're looking at that going, okay, as I listen to how these charts work out, where's my company probably falling in this grid? But let's talk about the vertical axis at first. As I climbed into this and looking at how the research was conducted and how the scoring takes place, I looked at the vertical axis as almost like a modern version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't be excelling in that business impact sector if I can't get my basic risk cleared, right? So there's a building block component of it here. And the concept of risk, that's risk really broadly stated. It is anything that's going to make your organization stop and go backwards. And I think in today's world, we immediately think of risk as maybe as cyber or as compliance. And those components, it'll be interesting when we get to that slide, what those two measurements really affect in the outcomes here. But it is anything else, right? Your staff is a risk. Your partners are a risk, right? So again, it's anything that makes you go backwards. Costs are just those things that we think about here. But as we go up the realm here or up the ladder, operational impacts is technology working in your favor to allow your business to operate more quickly, more effectively and efficiently? And then ultimately, what's the business impact of that? Can I get new products and services out to market quicker? And again, a lot of people are working with or improving those operational impacts, but there are companies with superior brand recognition that maybe not, they're in the pinnacle rank, but they're in the pinnacle rank because they can get that brand recognition component, right? Where they do something and the world is watching, right? That's what gets them up into those high level ranks. Now, the bottom sector, this is where it really kind of gets complicated. There's multiple dimensions at play here. But the one interesting thing on that horizontal axis is almost 40% of the scoring there has some component to do with your people, right? People, there is a big aspect of technology, but it is how current are people staying with technology? How effectively are people being able to take advantage of technology? And that is one thing that we see in common with this is that those pinnacle organizations their people are ahead of the curve. And again, that could be the IT organization, but could also be the business people who are trying to take advantage of that next piece of technology. But the technology is working on their behalf, not the other way around. So if we climb into this now, and I think there's the next couple of slides, we'll talk about some really interesting findings as we drill a little bit deeper. So if we look on the strategic impact side, Tim, again, this was that horizontal axis, right? This is kind of where we start to see some of the differences between a pinnacle and a non-pinnacle organization. So as I mentioned about that brand satisfaction or how people want technology to be interacting with them more effectively, the pinnacle companies are killing it in those first two measurements, right? Improving customer satisfaction and introducing new products and services. They are out there, they're able to cycle through, and again, the technology is working with them. I think, one thing that it's a common question we get out there, in this world that's moving so much faster, a common issue we see is your go-to-market practices. How do I take that product from concept to first sale, and how efficiently can the whole organization move that concept through is a big differentiator that we see there. but not necessarily as differentiating is, improving competitive positioning. Definitely the pinnacle people are out there, but the other organizations are kind of keeping up track. And it's the same thing with being able to, support growth, right? Again, the pinnacle companies are doing it just that much more efficiently. But where we really see the big changes on those operational sides, right? We can see, some very big differences in how quickly a pinnacle organization can go to market and get those products out there. So these are the things. If this sounds like something your organization is trying to do and might be making progress, but isn't necessarily seeing all the value there, this is kind of where this analysis could really help your organization uncover and kind of dive deeper and find, where you're going to make those next big gains and improvements. Taking another look at it here, if we go back and now we take a look at, let's just take a look, and I'm going to start on the right side of the page. I alluded to this earlier, risk and compliance. If we look at cyber and risk, we did not see a big change or a big difference or delta between pinnacle and non-pinnacle. And our obvious question was, okay, well, why is that? Well, we came to the conclusion that everybody's faced with the same issues. Everybody's dealing with all the same cyber issues, and everybody's dealing with all the same compliance issues, and nobody feels like we've gotten ahead of it. And again, I think that's just the case that both of these markets or both of these spaces are rapidly evolving. There's constantly new compliance coming out there. Everybody's got to stay ahead of, and same thing on cyber. So that's why we didn't see a difference there. But where did we see the big difference? Again, it comes back to people. And it's either your people or the third party risk that's out there. And I think, if anything, 2020 really changed the vernacular, right? We used to talk a lot about disaster recovery, and maybe business continuity was out there in the space. But after 2020, business continuity became the big word, in that my extended supply chain needs to be more resilient and robust. Well, the pinnacle companies had been through, and I've worked with a couple of them. There's typically been an event in the past that makes them realize that they needed an extended visibility, extended business continuity to understand, if I lose a facility, if I lose a site, it may not be mine, but how do I continue working when that happens? And they had those plans. Maybe those plans weren't specific to a global pandemic, but they were developed well enough that they could pull that off the shelf and say, okay, here's how we adapt and here's how we move forward. So, Tim, you talk with more of our customers than I do. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think you make an interesting point on business continuity, right? And there are most organizations that have a great continuity plan have been through a challenge, right? And it's almost a learning opportunity. And interestingly, in 2020, we all went through a challenge, right? So we all had to have business continuity put in place. So a lot of us have done that, more cloud enabled, enabling remote workforces, enabling all our supply chains and our customer interactions to continue even in the face of a major disruption. Now I'm seeing more organizations really look at how to kind of operate in a more strategic way, leveraging technology to make better decisions, make decisions faster, shorten the supply chain lead times so that the decisions are closer to the customer. So there's a lot of I think more strategic things going on. We had to step back and deal with some basics for a couple of years during the pandemic, and now we're seeing kind of a return to strategy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So now this one, I want to kind of dwell on this left-hand side of the slide a little bit, because this one is where it gets really interesting, right? So the financial impact of your investments on technology, right? So let's look at the difference between pinnacle and non-pinnacle. And I'm going to start at the bottom from an operating cost perspective, because to me, this is what's really going to drive the rest of it, right? We don't see a big separation, but again, I think that is due to the fact that a lot of times when we're dealing with technology projects, there's a hyper focus, and as there should be, right, on cost, but everybody's got the same lens against cost. And that's why we don't see a lot of separation. But really, the focus needs to be on profits and revenue. And I had a mentor who early on in my career, I was working with him on developing a strategy for this organization. And, we talked a little bit about cost. And he stopped at one point and said, Jerry, you can only do so much good for an organization if you focus on reducing cost. He said, I'm looking for a plan that's going to allow me to double or triple revenue in the next 3 years. And that was kind of like, that was a pullback moment to say, all right, well, let's change the nature of this conversation then. And yeah, we always need to be mindful of money because, the cost of the technology, which is our new manufacturing plant or our new production line, however we want to characterize it, needs to be, effective and efficient at the end of the day. But if we're not, as you put it, Tim, if we're not adding value, then really we're on nothing more than technology joyride. So make sure the operating costs are there, but let's look, looking at this revenue and gross profits, those are the big separators of where Pinnacle organizations are really getting more out of their technology, and in some cases we've seen over a 1.5x return on investment compared to the non-Pinnacle folks. So what have you seen with a couple of the customers you're very closely tied with in this last year?
Well, I think, Jerry, your point on focusing on gross profit growth and revenue growth is so spot on. And if you look at these organizations that are really investing and managing technology well, it's striking how much better they are doing. We were kind of thinking it might be a 15-20% difference when we started looking at that Pinnacle group, but it's significantly more. And I think this is really helpful as CIOs or COOs or organizations are trying to make a business case for this investment that organizations are having to make.
Yeah. But I think, and as we get to the recommendation section, this is really where it's going to come into play is understanding. And if we go back a couple of slides, one of the factors, one of the metrics is business cycle time, right? These Pinnacle companies are able to cycle through their go-to-market process quicker. They're able to do it more effectively, more efficiently, and all of that stuff comes into play. But a lot of that is the technology becomes an enabler, but really it's the people in the process at work that really is what delivers a lot of this stuff. And so have no understanding that some of this stuff is going to be a long-term objective and really knowing. And if I think about the companies that I've worked with in the past, the companies who have done a fantastic job on these upper two realize that value chain or that value realization is a longer term exercise. And there's an individual who is tasked with finding that efficiency. And that could come back in the form of changes on the process side or additional technology, but there's that constant journey to go and find that value realization. Let's look at this now from the inverse side, right? So let's look at maybe some of the negative aspects, but how is it that a Pinnacle organization is less impacted by the others? So, we've all seen the challenges in the job market these days. We're no different than anybody else, but where does a Pinnacle, let's talk about the separation between Pinnacle and non-Pinnacle. And I'd even say that these first two items of talent scarcity and resistance to change are actually closely linked with each other. Again, one thing that we found analyzing the raw data and the research is that technical debt is a big issue for companies. And a lot of companies are aggressively dealing with it. Pinnacle companies are definitely managing it on a very proactive basis, and these other companies are not. And, if I think back to, even, from the early days of the pandemic, and again, you and I have both been in this industry for a long time, and we've all heard, and I probably have a scorecard somewhere that I've kept of all the different technologies that have been claimed to have died off, but are still out there today. And if we just wind the clock back for 2 years, we talk about the IRS, cutting those pandemic checks. They couldn't find COBOL programmers. COBOL was still a thing. And so when you find yourself in a moment where you need to pivot and you need to step ahead, you got to be able to find the people who can go ahead and deliver on the technology. And one challenge that we've seen is that organizations struggle with that change, right? They maybe there's a love-hate relationship with that piece of technology, but it's in place and they know it's working, and they're worried about what's the impact of change. But if you measure that over, 1 to 2 decades, it becomes a bigger and bigger, more impactful detractor from your ability to pivot in a moment where you need to go forward. And, if we think just about the evolution of technology, things that we struggled with even 5 years ago are no longer an issue today. And so I think that, a conversation I've actually had, with a couple of different customers just in the last couple of weeks, as we talk about the need to swap out an older system for a newer one, is that they're actually using 8 to 10-year-old data points when they think about the impact of that change, when really, we're measuring these projects much differently today. They're designed to go quicker. Integration is not necessarily the challenge that we've seen anymore today. And so that is, that's a big component for me. But Tim, I'd rather get your take on the bottom half, because I know that you've been talking a lot about helping, not just the IT organization, but how do you help CEOs, CFOs, and COOs on getting their heads more, or getting themselves more involved in technology and helping understand the digital journey and the need for support, and how they up their own technology game?
It's interesting. I think those, Jerry, those bottom two elements are very closely related, right? First of all, sometimes people think this digital journey is something that happens over in the IT department, and even worse, if the IT department is trying to do it over there by themselves. I think the first thing is you have to have some vision around how technology can help your organization do business differently, right? And you have to go out and talk to the business stakeholders, the business sponsors, the VP of sales, the COO, and really talk about how technology is working for them today and how they think technology could work for them in the future, and take some ideas to them that help them get inspired and engaged. And I think the most important thing is the entire leadership team, the entire organization has to be engaged in that process. And of course, in order to do that, you really need executive support, right? But those conversations are what it takes to build that executive support. Then once you have that, you need the continued engagement. And we've seen some extraordinary things. We had a customer who literally during the pandemic, a lot of they had retail operations, right? Those operations were closed down, and they hadn't made much investment in their e-commerce, their digital customer interaction. During pandemic, while they were facing crisis, they, as a leadership team, came together, made a massive investment over a very short period of time to just completely re-envision that, and saw just extraordinary results coming out of that. And I think that's the kind of courage it takes, but they were very methodical in really understanding what they were going to accomplish with that investment.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to get my facts wrong here, but the order of magnitude is more of what's important. I did a presentation in the middle of the pandemic talking about this very issue, and the companies who had already made that investment in e-com and omni-channel were very well positioned to do well in that moment when retail shut down. And I think we saw something in the neighborhood of e-com had, I think it was roughly 10 years worth of growth over the course of just 6-7 months, right? And again, it was that need, that urgency to go forward. But what's interesting, Tim, as I listen back to what you just said, it almost sounds like we need to go and change that line where it says digital journey. And it almost sounds like we need to change the word journey to something else, because it's not a place with an end destination. It's more of, this is our new everyday. This is our lifestyle now, that digital is just part of everything that we're doing.
Yeah, Jerry, I think that is a very good point. And as you know, we at Synoptic have literally spent a lot of time changing our nomenclature, because we used to talk about plan, build, operate as kind of a systems life cycle. We just don't use those terms anymore. We talk about, there's big investments, and those are kind of transformations, but then there's just continuous evolution. There's none of this buy, build, and then set it and forget it. That's just gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, maybe to throw our vernacular out there a little bit, that last phase is evolve. And that is something that I've seen in common with the pinnacle companies that I've actually had experience with. And evolution of all of these items is just part and parcel of how they work. Right. I've worked with some companies. The first question I ask them is, do you have a strategic plan? Do you perform strategic planning? And we get a mixed bag of answers there. But the pinnacle companies are, yeah, we've got a strategic plan. It is updated on a constant basis. It's part of what we do from an annual planning cycle. And the non-pinnacle companies are in some other phase of that, of we're trying to get it started. We did one last year and they're moving forward. But the presence or lack thereof of that strategic plan and the revisitation of it are crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we move ahead here, right, we start to talk about, how can we help, right? Where does Synoptic come into play here? And, if we talk about a couple of these items here, and Tim, maybe we can kind of, pick apart this slide together. Really finding optimization is critical, right? One of the things that we constantly find is, and again, I think, Tim, it's back to your vernacular question, is, plan, build, run, right? Well, there's an inherent start stop that comes with that. And, I think, if I think back to just a couple of the strategic roadmaps that I've helped build with our customers, the one thing we tell them is that, the roadmap that we're putting together for you, this is a 3 to 5 year roadmap, and it's designed in such a way that there's not going to be a stop in the middle of saying, somebody holding up their hand saying, hey, hold on for a second, let me catch my breath here. It's designed to continually be evolving and growing as we move forward. Technology, backup and recovery and disaster recovery, business continuity needs to be dropped in there as well. That, these are all things, like we mentioned, these are risk issues. We look at them broadly, and they need to be so far in your rear view mirror because they're dependable, right? An old phrase out there is we have dial tone reliability, that it's just always there working. And when I need to invoke it, I can go forward. But Tim, let's get your take down on that middle one with value realization, and what you're seeing with some of the folks you're working with.
Sure. I think there's this whole, you talked a little bit earlier about tech debt, Jerry, and part of it is we have these legacy systems, and what can easily happen is all of a sudden your IT budget is increased and your technology budget is increasingly OpEx, right? It's taking care of these legacy systems. It consumes more and more of your budget. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and there's no investment going on. You're just 95% of your budget is spent. And that's when you have to step back and say, okay, how do I leapfrog this? How do I get back and consolidate infrastructure, get out of the infrastructure business, reduce the operational cost so that I can get some of that budget back and invest in new capabilities?
Yeah. Yep. I think, the other thing too here is that if I go all the way back to the beginning with all of that technology out there, I think most people look at that and there is kind of a, oh my gosh, moment that a lot of folks are probably having there to say, how do I get in front of all of this technology? And again, I think where we come into play is across all of the different sectors of our organization, right? We have professionals in the area of, consulting, strategy, application management, infrastructure, architecture, and security and risk management. and we can bring a number of different disciplines to bear there that allow you to feel like you've got a partner in the game here who can help you get ahead of the technology and not necessarily put you on a technology joyride. So, definitely, there's more than enough work to be done out there. And again, what we'd rather see is that customer who is very methodically and rapidly getting through the fundamental phases and into the advanced phases so that you can start to see some of those big financial benefits out of these investments. So jumping right to here, right? Let's talk about, maybe a couple of the questions that we get regularly is, most people say, okay, I looked at that map and I think I see where I am, but how do I move a little bit from where I'm currently at, and how do I maybe start to put myself on, that road to improvement? So strategic planning and governance, Tim, why don't you give us your bit there? Because you've got some incredible insights there.
Thanks, Jerry. I am just a relentless proponent of just continuous technology planning, right? If there isn't a continuous process with business stakeholders engaged to relentlessly plan and replan your technology, you're going to get off track. You're going to fall behind, or you're not going to get the results that you expected because you don't have those investments tied to your business outcomes and direction.
Yep.
And having a defined process for continuing to plan your technology and maintain and update those plans with business input is absolutely critical. That I didn't see any pinnacle organization that was a pinnacle organization that doesn't have real structure around doing that.
Yeah. I think, the phrase that I use and we use in the consulting group is governance is not about saying no. It's how do we get to yes in such a way that the company or the organization benefits at the end of it, right? We definitely see with some groups is that there's a little bit too much yes too quickly. And I even think back to an interaction I had with a customer many, many years ago where he had the concept of an idea and it was an interesting project. But I kind of had to sit down with them at one point and say, look, the business value of this thing is not baked enough that if you're committed that you want to kick this project off in the next couple of weeks, I'll hold the door open for you while you go in to talk with the CFO, but I'm going to close the door behind you and you're doing that one on your own. And he stopped for a second and he said, well, okay, well, why is that? And we got to talking about, the fact that this project conceptually was really interesting and had potential, but it was very short on that value realization. So we went back and we worked it all out and we got to a point where we did end up kicking the project off after all, but it had a much more well-developed business plan surrounding it. And that really is what governance is about, getting to a point of approving technology when it's ready to go and making sure that it isn't just, let me just pull the latest, buzzword tech off the shelf and put it in and, move on to the next thing when I'm tired of that tool. And that leads us then into technical debt, right? Technical debt is a very real issue. And if you're not addressing it regularly and constantly, it's going to continue to build up. But Tim, how about this, right? Is this a discussion that only needs to be had inside of the halls of IT, or is this a company-wide conversation that needs to occur?
Jerry, this is a company-wide conversation, right? Because when you address it, it requires change that impacts usually the business in some way. And you have to figure out how the business is going to absorb that change. And it requires financial investment just to stay current, right? And or catch up with the marketplace. So it's which is that, prioritizing it is usually it's competing with other initiatives in the organization, and you have to educate on the organization on why it has to be addressed.
Yep. I think that that's a very real issue, and again, I think that I think organizations are, and this is a tough one because this gets into the non-technical side of this. This gets into more of the organizational dynamic side of change, and if we go back up to strategic planning and governance, and even diving deeper into that horizontal access, right? The Pinnacle study is measuring an organization's ability to change, evolve, and conduct and execute change management, their ability to make decisions and move forward on that. And again, the companies who are doing well in the Pinnacle research have mastered that approach. And it doesn't, it's definitely, it's hard and it's awkward if you don't do it or haven't done it. But once you get into the discipline of just saying, look, this is the issue, we need to work through this, we need to, we're going to put this technology in. And I think that's where, both business and IT come together now, in that it's not just, I'm going to put these technical solutions in place and I'm going to check off the boxes that this transaction works and that transaction works. But a Pinnacle organization looks at that and says, let's lay that over the concept of process and process efficiency. And so let's find a way to make the technology work on behalf of the others, or on behalf of the individuals that we're servicing, so that it becomes a more technology serving the business instead of the other way around.
That's
right?
absolutely it, Jerry. I always think of it, it's almost like your system should be a mirror of your business, and that's really enabling it, right? It's a reflection. And if those systems don't map to that business and aren't enabling it and don't reflect what the business is trying to do, then they become irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then finally, that leads us to value realization, right? So how do we find the value in this, and where do we go? There's a lot of different ways to approach this. Tim, what have you seen done effectively in this space?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of times we go, and when we're talking about technology and technology investment, we talk to the business and we try and the business stakeholders, and we try and tell them how the technology works. And quite frankly, most don't really care. If they cared that much, they would have become a technology professional, right? They really want to know, how is the value going to be realized, right? And it's so important for we as technology professionals, information technology management professionals, learn how to talk to the business about the outcomes they're trying to talk about, right? It's like a doctor, right? A doctor, they want to talk to you in terms of your medical outcomes, right? They don't talk to you about how your system works. So and the best ones really talk about outcomes, and I think that's the key to value realization. Because if you start talking about the outcomes you're going to get, and then really map out with your business partners how to realize that value, that's the first step to getting there.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as I was thinking about this slide, this issue, I was drawn back, just again, looking back over the past of companies that I've been with or worked with in the past. And I can think of those companies who have really excelled in this area. Number one, they had the mechanisms in place where the business was the sponsor for the technology, unless it was, low-level infrastructure type of work. But if this was a business application, something that was going to drive the bottom line, the business owned the solution. And there was always a partnership that was established between IT and the business where, IT would deliver the system, but ownership of the solution was really within the business. There were business process owners or subject matter experts who came and were empowered to make decisions, who helped shape the flow and the evolution of the platform. And the companies who were less effective, it was just more of, okay, well, IT put that in for us and just let us know how it goes at the end of the day.
Right.
And I know there's a lot less of that than there is today, but it's still out there in regards to, well, just tell us what to do. And you just don't get the same outcome if the business doesn't have that involvement. I mean, think about, personally, let's take it away from technology for a second. And let's just say you're going to do a remodel on your house. I need to have my kitchen done, right? You want the designer to just go ahead and put the kitchen in and surprise you at the end of the day? I don't think so. I think most people should want to have an input in kind of that final outcome, since it's going to have such a big impact in their world.
That's absolutely right, Jerry. We were recently kicking off a program with a customer, and the first steering committee meeting, I'm looking around the table, and it's us and a lot of IT team members. And I'm like, this system is going to have a major impact on the business. We need the business stakeholders in these meetings, right? Yeah. Otherwise, we're going to have problems.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Okay. So then the outcome, I think, the biggest outcome that we see, again, from people wanting to get moving down this journey, Pinnacle really is, it's the combination, the Pinnacle companies have mastered both that vertical and horizontal access. They're able to do multiple things at the same time. Really, as I've kind of explained it internally, the Pinnacle companies can chain these disciplines together and get compounding results out of their ability to combine multiple strategies, right? And again, it's change management, org evolution, and innovation at the same time to really become a different organization. And to your point, Tim, earlier, that's what's going to lead to staying power in the future here. The other piece of it really is nobody can go it alone anymore, right? And again, whether you're talking very specifically about a technology like security or networking or email, nobody's doing this stuff alone anymore, because there's so many places you need to be an expert. And so most Pinnacle companies realize where their core competencies are going to be. That's where they put their people. And then they partner up to supplement those areas where they're saying, I need great partnership, but I don't need to be the expert in that technology. So, Tim, why don't you tell a little bit more, if that's the lead into, say, who is Synoptek? We'll give a little bit of who we are while we queue up some of the questions that are coming in from the audience.
Sure, Jerry. I won't spend too much time on this, but a lot of you may know us as a partner of yours. But essentially, we've built a set of capabilities. Jerry talked about that multidisciplinary team that needs to do pretty much any digital project today. I mean, any project you do, whether it's a new business, a new ERP implementation, CRM, redesigning a platform, a new workforce productivity initiative with your collaboration systems, you need the people that know that technology platform. You need the people that can help you integrate it. You need the security people. You need the database people. You need everyone, the consumer and customer experience people. You need a team with all those experts on to really make it a great project. And so we've built an organization that for the typical initiatives, we can bring the full team, which allows us to hit schedules, really figure out what the customer has in place on their team, supplement any gaps, and then form a joint team to partner with the business to make these things happen. And that's our vision. We want to have a multidisciplinary teams that go enable these programs and really, in the end, achieve business outcomes.
That's great. All right. Well, Tim, that last comment you made, I think, is a great segue into some of the questions that we've had come in over the course of the last 50 minutes. First one, again, I think, maybe back to you, is how long should it take to verify the results of a new technology initiative?
That's interesting, Jerry. That is always a challenge, right? I'm just going to speak a little bit about some of our internal programs, right? When we make a technology investment at Synoptic to enable our business, first of all, we don't let it start until we have measurable business outcomes. And we have an enterprise program management office that tracks this. We get the project done, work with the business, and we need those business stakeholder partners to ensure those outcomes get achieved, right? Alongside us and providing the enabling technology. But oftentimes we will keep that project open, that program open for a year or two, because we measure and report back on the business results. And that's part of the accountability for making that investment, that our team members are coming back and talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in that same world. I mean, so it's kind of second nature for me, where you didn't get a project approved unless you had a strong business and financial case, and we were trained in how to put those together. And again, depending upon the size of the project, there was always a review cycle to say, did we accomplish what we were trying to do? And it was as much business cycle as it was part of the culture of the organization. You could not separate the two, but there was always that, let's go back a year after and let's go and say, why did we do this again? What did we accomplish? Have we achieved it? And I can, remember a couple of projects that didn't quite achieve what they needed to do, where it was, okay, we got to go back and we got to go and find that. Why did we miss that? Right? That, that constant focus for either improvement or excellence, however you want to characterize it, is just inherent in these pinnacle organizations. Another one was, came in here. It said, and this actually came from a conversation we had with a customer, is, I thought I would have been a little higher up. Why is it that, I kind of scored over here? I thought I would have been a little bit up here. And again, in going through the raw data, what we saw was these scores are cumulative. So if I can hit one, but I didn't hit, like on those financial results, maybe I got my operating costs good, but I never delivered on revenue and profit, you really missed your opportunity to excel. And like I said before, chaining these things together is really what provides a compounding effect that really gets you higher up. And as you can imagine, right? Okay, so maybe I'm monitoring this or operating this technology efficiently, but I haven't changed my revenue or my operating characteristics. Okay, but so I'm treading water, right? That's kept you in the mid ranks, and you're treading water and you're getting by, but you're really not excelling and getting all of those values out there that we see with the pinnacle people. Let's see here. And again, this is another one that came from the customers. So as I mentioned before, as we look at that horizontal axis, it was very much multi-dimensional, right? There were two main sectors, and in each sector, there were four main measurements that went in there. And there was a tremendous amount of overlap. And one of the customers said, well, it feels like those things overlap. And it wasn't necessarily that, and so if I was bad in one score, I kind of saw that effect going on through and throughout. And that is definitely what we saw. As I mentioned before, on that horizontal axis, nearly 40% of those measurements had something to do with people. All right. And just let that sink in for a second. Technology was a major factor, but it was my ability to change the organization or have a culture that was capable of moving forward, or having people who were able to take advantage of technology. These are very people-centric issues. And again, it's not that they were repeating, but it's a compounding effect where the pinnacle companies are really taking better advantage of all of that. So
that's absolutely it, Jerry. I think we saw it when we were talking on the earlier slide. So there's very strong correlation between some of these things, right? If you don't have a good vision with clear outcomes, it's hard to get executive support. Yeah. So you score low in both of those things.
Absolutely. Gotcha. So Tim, maybe to conclude this whole thing, I guess maybe what I'd like to know, and maybe the rest of the audience would like to know, where are we going forward with this pinnacle study? How are we helping the customers? How are we using the information, and how do we see it evolving?
Well, Jerry, that's a good question. So this is our first year doing this. We learned a lot in the process, and we hope we had over 100 customers participate. I think almost 120 customers. And we're looking forward to coming back this coming year and doing it again. And the goal of it is to be able to show how customers are progressing and making the changes. The other element we're doing is we're going back to and sitting down with all of our customers, definitely the ones that participated, but also those that didn't, to just talk about some of these things and talk about their particular organization along some of these dimensions. So I'm excited about those conversations. We've had a few already, and they've been super productive. They kind of take you out of the day-to-day operations of the projects or the running IT and get you up and allow you to think more broadly and strategically about what your organization is trying to do and the role of your technology investment in doing that.
Well, and I couldn't agree more, Tim. I mean, I think it is that aspect of stepping out of the here and now. And that's the hard part, right? Because if we're too tactical, if we're too operationally focused, we lose sight of that grander vision. So that ability to step out on that annual basis and being able to continually change course or adapt as you see obstacles in front of you is important. So I'm excited for the next step here.
Yeah, I am too. I think it could be a great tool for our customer organizations, if nothing else, to just have a common language to talk about their technology and how it fits with their business, and all refer to as a leadership team or a management team in evolving that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Tim, we're at time here. I enjoyed the conversation and all the prep we did kind of leading up to this, but is there any closing remarks you want to make?
Well, Jerry, I enjoyed it as well. I enjoyed seeing the outcomes. I enjoyed actually really getting out and talking to customers. I participated in a lot of the survey interviews that the Everest Group did. And it was really interesting to see what's going on in the market. So I really look forward to participating in this digital transformation that we're all going through and doing it in a conscious, methodical way to really get some results out there.
Gotcha. All right. Great thoughts there, Tim. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to learn more about this, and definitely reach out to either Tim or myself if you're interested in continuing the conversation. All right. Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.